A new survey just out shows jobs, cost of living and a need for different views in Parliament as the key issues shaping voting decisions in GE 2020. We speak to the researchers about the results and implications.
Migrant workers under quarantine. More than 300 will serve a 14-day quarantine after a new COVID-19 case was identified at their dorm in Tuas.
And light up your weekend with this new creation from the Intercontinental's Cantonese restaurant. Food critic Wong Ah Yoke will give us his verdict on the dish. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
Now I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
Well, news just in, jobs, cost of living as well as political diversity weighed heavily on Singaporeans' minds in GE 2020.
These are among key findings of the survey by the Institute of Policy Studies. The think tank also found that across all age groups, there was a fall in the proportion of people who thought the People's Action Party was credible, while the opposite was true for the Workers' Party.
Overall, the proportion of respondents who saw PAP as credible fell from 93% in 2015 to 86% in 2020.
And compared with 2015, the proportion of those categorized as politically conservative shrank by more than half.
Well, we'll delve deeper into this with our guests in a few moments, but just so you know, people in the conservative category are defined in the survey as those who disagree with the need for change in the electoral system, checks and balances, or different voices in Parliament.
There are two other categories, the swing and pluralist. Those in the swing category are defined as being mixed in their views.
And pluralists desire more political diversity.
Lots to digest, so we're very pleased to welcome two members of the research team, Dr. Gillian Koh, who's Deputy Director of Research and Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies.
Dr. Teo Kay Kee joins us as well. She's a postdoctoral fellow at the IPS Social Lab. As you both know, respondents cited the need for good and efficient government as the top priority on a list of 15 issues. A new item on this year's list was the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Almost 9 out of 10 voters surveyed said it was important or very important. So what does this mean in terms of Singaporeans' expectations of the government and possible implications on how they vote in the next GE? Dr. Koh, let's start off this discussion with you.
Well, I think what we did was to pair that with the issue of job situation and cost of living. So we see that there is a group of respondents to our survey, which is indicative of the citizen population that are concerned about the bread and butter issues, their livelihoods, in addition to what COVID meant to their lives, disease and health. So I think that's one key issue that was a driver to sentiment during the election and certainly its outcome.
Right. Well, three major issues that saw the sharpest spike in very important ratings compared with 2015 were the job situation, cost of living, and the need for different views in Parliament.
Jobs and cost of living were a focus of those aged 30 to 54 in low to middle income households, while having greater political diversity appealed more to younger voters aged 21 to 29 holding PMET jobs. Dr. Teo, let's bring you into this. To what extent did the COVID-19 pandemic influence these priorities?
I think we can see that for particularly the cost of living and job situation, at the time of the elections, that was one of the key issues that either people brought up or the parties themselves brought up. So it is not very surprising for us to see that these two issues came up tops. We also have to note that actually cost of living has been one of the top issues since we started the survey series. So it has always been something that people are concerned about. Probably the pandemic did bring up more concerns about this because we started seeing implications on the economy. We had the circuit breaker before the elections and people started getting a little more worried. So those issues came up as more of a priority for these people. In terms of political pluralism, we also see that maybe people started thinking that policies perhaps could benefit from more views or alternative opinions, whether outside or within Parliament. So that might have also been one of the drivers based on the pandemic.
Well, Dr. Koh, how did these concerns affect the results of GE 2020? And moving forward, what are the future implications for political parties?
Well, I think that as Dr. Teo just explained, there are two drivers. So the bread and butter issues, and now we have a clear idea of which segment in particular was concerned about that. We're looking at people with just post-secondary education and those in low to low middle household income categories. But we see that the other driver is a desire for political competition, a desire for the opposition to be in existence, to add to the role that the PAP plays as the government. And in that case, we see that it is the younger voters, those in the 21 to 29 age band, and also those in the higher professional class, those in the PMET class, that consistently respond to our waves of survey indicating that they value political pluralism. So what are the implications? First, given that the set of issues that matter to Singaporeans, a really efficient government, cost of living, the job situation, the handling of COVID-19, then certainly for a particular segment, especially the segments that probably feel that they are ill-equipped for the economy and jobs of the future, then there has to be a doubling down of the efforts to help them assuage their concerns about job and income insecurity. But also, there's no shortage of good ideas and, in fact, measures introduced by the PAP. So what more can the opposition parties offer in that respect? But secondly, the role of opposition parties is not just here to stay, but will increase, because we see the clear trend that as the younger voters, but also the voters within the higher socioeconomic classes are always the ones with a higher proportion of those we call pluralists. So in other words, the opposition is safe in knowing that there's always some demand for them, but what would make the difference among the wide range of opposition parties there are? So in terms of the general election outcome, where we've seen that there are no three-cornered fights, which means that there will always be some room for an opposition party if it's just a straight fight between the PAP. But what more can the opposition parties do to appeal and therefore respond to that desire for political competition? In which case, read the data with regard to characteristics of candidates that people are looking for and all the other issues.
Right. Adding to what you've just said, doctors, and of course there's another aspect of the survey as well. There was a decline in the proportion of respondents who thought the PAP was credible, while the opposite was true for the Workers' Party.
That's right. In fact, both ends of the socio-economic spectrum found WP credible, from highest occupation class of service to those in the lowest housing category. So, Dr. Teo, what are the factors that could have contributed to this shift?
For these shifts, I think there are probably also the drivers that we mentioned just now, for job situation as well as the demand for political pluralism. So it is likely, because when we look at the breakdowns of which demographic groups are more concerned about these issues, we see that those who are from the lower socioeconomic groups were more concerned about cost of living and job situation, and these were also the groups that actually had slight increases in the proportions that rated the WP as credible. But we do have to note that actually for these groups, right, they started with a lower proportion, so there is more room for them to increase in proportion, especially when we look at the general trend this year, where there was more support for opposition parties in general. In terms of political pluralism, I think that also was a key factor for helping the WP well, also because they did run a very good campaign and they did have candidates that showed themselves well, whether during the debates or as their profiles and what they have done. So that might have also contributed to people who are looking for political pluralism and want a party that can actually deliver what they want in parliament. So perhaps these factors contributed to their particular rise in credibility ratings.
Right. Dr. Koh, your thoughts. What are the electoral implications for the PAP and opposition parties going forward?
Well, I think for the PAP, Minister Lawrence Wong had given his analysis, and our results do jive well, do resonate with what he has said. So he, as the spokesman for the PAP, recognized that that there is anyway a consistent trend among Singaporeans to want the voice of the opposition. So you've seen the PAP government designate the leader of the Workers' Party, Pritam Singh, as somebody who would symbolize and also lead the opposition voice in Parliament. So I think there's the recognition of the PAP that the opposition is here to stay, and that means that there will be need not just for the PAP to be able to engage a broad diversity of Singaporeans in trying to understand their voice, understand their concerns, and what is it about the diversity of views that they are trying to, express or want to be seen expressed in Parliament. But on the other hand, the opposition parties recognizing that, our data says efficient government matters, the issue of job situation matters. There is that demographic of those who are somewhere in the low income and post-secondary education groups that are insecure with regard to life. Then I think they've also got to come up with those diverse views and good ideas, and I think that is why the PAP has itself said to the leader of the opposition that he very much that they very much hope he will put together the opposition set of good policy ideas to help Singaporeans in general.
Right. Well, another finding from the IPS survey, compared with 2015, the proportion of those categorized as conservative shrank by more than half, from 44.3% to 18.5%. Conservatives are defined in the survey as those who disagree with the need for change in the electoral system, checks and balances, or different voices in Parliament.
Conversely, pluralists agree there is need for change in the electoral system, checks and balances, and different voices in Parliament. And the proportion in that category rose from 18% in the 2015 survey to 22.4%.
Those in the swing category with an eclectic mix of views rose sharply by more than 20 percentage points to 59.2%. So we're seeing a drop in the number of conservatives, a sharp rise in pluralists, and a huge shift towards the swing category. So Dr. Teo, what do you think are the reasons behind these changes?
Well, we see the drop in conservative numbers, first of all. It's likely also a result of the current times, because if we look when compared to 2015, the proportion of conservatives actually was much larger. So during that election, we saw that there was a great support for the incumbent government, where the PAP actually won much larger proportion of votes. So this also probably indicates that more people find that they do want slight changes in the status quo, not the same as before, which therefore contributes to the larger group of people who are in the swing category. So the swing group actually means that they perhaps want some checks and balances, but they maybe think that the the electoral system can remain, or vice versa. So these wide range of combinations, actually, we all classify them as swing voters. So looking at the large proportion this year in the swing category, it is likely that these people have different opinions about the different aspects of the electoral system, and they probably want to see some change, but not too much, because there's always a more higher priority for efficient government, and also to be able to deliver on various of the top issues that we have found in this survey. So that is probably why we have a larger group in the swing, rather than all shifting towards the pluralist category.
Now, great points so far. So, Dr. Koh, just to round up our discussion for today, anything that you'd like to add on?
Well, I would just like to reinforce the point that the category of swing voters does kind of value efficient government very highly. In fact, even higher than those in the conservative category and the pluralist category. So they're a mixed bag, as my colleague has said, of those who want efficient government, but probably feel that more checks and balances and diversity of views will reinforce the possibility of having more efficient government in Singapore. And the second one, to do with the electoral strategy, as you had asked just now, Priyanto. Actually, we do have a set of questions about media use, and there you see that the use of the internet has popped up. And I think that whichever party or the parties that have a good strategy in terms of outreach online is going to make an impact for particular groups, those in the younger category and those in the service class. Bear in mind that these are all groups that not just refer to the internet, but they refer to a whole range of media. And certainly one flank in terms of the electoral strategy has to do with putting out effective engagement strategies online in order to win some bandwidth among the voters in the next election.
All right, definitely points to ponder. Well, thank you so much, Drs. Koh and Teo, for setting aside time to speak with us and for sharing more on the findings of the survey. Now, we've been speaking to Dr. Gillian Koh, Deputy Director of Research and Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies,
as well as Dr. Teo K. Kee, a postdoctoral fellow at the IPS Social Lab. You can, of course, read all about the findings from the IPS's post-election survey at straitstimes.com.
An update on the COVID-19 situation here. 21 new cases were confirmed today. They included 3 community cases comprising Singaporeans or permanent residents.
There were also 15 imported cases, all of whom have been placed on stay-home notices upon their arrival in Singapore. More details will be shared later tonight.
In other local news, 342 migrant workers will serve a 14-day quarantine after a COVID-19 patient was detected on Monday in the Tuas dormitory at which they were staying. This new case was discovered through rostered routine testing. As a precautionary measure, a stay-home notice was issued to all workers staying at 2 blocks in the dorm. But after further investigation, it was established that it was unlikely for workers from different blocks to have intermixed.
The Defence Ministry said today that military training in Singapore will be progressively stepped up in the coming months with COVID-19 safety measures. The ministry will continue to monitor the COVID-19 situation here and review the safe management measures to keep servicemen safe. Since late May, with safety measures in place, 2 batches of recruits have been trained at the Singapore Armed Forces Basic Military Training Centre in Pulau Tekong.
Suspension of late payment charges on HDB mortgage arrears will be extended for a second time to March next year. Families living in public rental flats will also have their rent slashed by half for 3 months from October to December. Late payment charges for these households will also continue to be suspended until the end of March 2021.
Some 9,000 opportunities in professional services comprising jobs, traineeships or attachments and training courses have been made available since April.
The latest figures from the Manpower Ministry highlight the diverse nature of role in the sector, from accountants to architects. Multimedia journalist Xiao Suen has more.
Despite being physically grounded by travel restrictions, the professional services industry still relies on crossing borders, even if done virtually and remotely.
It is a high-growth sector for Singapore and for the world. It is a sector where many Singaporeans also aspire to join, but it is also very important for Singapore as a business hub. The professional service sector actually underpins our status as a business hub. The challenges and opportunities are both global. Because we serve the international market, we get connected to the rest of the world. It also begs the question as to why such professional services firms want to be in Singapore and not elsewhere.
Since April, about 9,000 opportunities in the professional sector have been made available, but many of these roles are still unfilled. Manpower Minister Josephine Teo said that part of the reason is because some of the roles have emerged only more recently. However, she also acknowledged that the roles might not be as easy to fill.
If you look at the range of opportunities, 8 in 10 of them are for PMET roles. And if you look to the employers and ask them, what is it that they are looking for, I think the expectation is also higher, meaning that companies will not hastily want to take anyone on board just to fill the openings. They would want to look for individuals with not just the right skill sets, because even if they don't have the right skill sets, that part can be topped up. But more importantly, they're looking for people with a certain attitude.
With the pandemic creating a need for businesses to pivot and adapt, the minister stressed that the demand of professional services will increase, and digitalization will become even more crucial than ever, creating opportunities for those willing to learn and develop in such areas. Chao Suen for the Straits Times.
In the global headlines, US biotech firm Moderna told the Financial Times that it will not seek an emergency use authorization for its coronavirus vaccine before November 25th. It's a blow to President Donald Trump's hopes of having a vaccine ready before the November 3rd election to give his campaign a much-needed boost. And this has raised concern among experts that his administration may attempt to interfere with the regulatory process for political reasons.
According to 3 sources familiar with the matter, the US Food and Drug Administration has broadened its investigation of a serious illness in AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine study. It will look at data from earlier trials of similar vaccines developed by the same scientists. The widened scope of the FDA probe raises the likelihood of additional delays for what has been one of the most advanced COVID-19 vaccine candidates in development. The requested data was expected to arrive this week, after which the FDA would need time to analyze it.
Well, conversely, European regulators are set to start an accelerated review of the same vaccine. According to a source with knowledge of the situation, the European Medicines Agency is expected to announce the rolling review as soon as this week. The move would be a key step forward for the Oxford AstraZeneca shots after trials were halted earlier this month due to concerns about a participant in the UK study who became ill.
Now, 2 contrasting scenes today in Hong Kong as China marks its National Day holiday. On the streets, dozens of police officers walked alongside veteran pro-democracy activist Leong Kwok Hung, known as Long Hair. He held a banner that read, "There is no National Day celebration, only national mourning." Meanwhile, during a ceremony attended by senior Chinese officials, Chief Executive Carrie Lam hailed a return to peace in Hong Kong after Beijing imposed a security law that helped suppress a pro-democracy movement.
And Tuesday's chaotic US presidential debate produced a surge of cash for Joe Biden from Democratic grassroots donors who poured nearly $10 million into his campaign between 9 p.m. and midnight. According to a campaign official, Mr. Biden had his best hour of fundraising in the campaign between 10 and 11 p.m., taking in $3.8 million. President Donald Trump's campaign, meanwhile, has not released figures on its post-debate fundraising.
It's Thursday, so that means a check-in with our colleagues at Live for ideas on how we can spend our weekend. Now, I know, Olivia, that you have something exciting happening this weekend.
Yes, I have the social event of the year, my daughter's third birthday.
So this is the first daughter?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just going to be a small family affair.
Okay, now if you haven't been invited to this birthday party, here's what else is in store. Chinese restaurant Man Fu Yen reopens at the Intercontinental Singapore Hotel with a new menu by executive chef Aaron Tan.
To share more is food critic Wong Ah Yoke. So Ah Yoke, what can we expect from the new offerings at Fu Man Yuan?
Man Fu Yuan, sorry. It's the Chinese restaurant at the Intercontinental Singapore in Middle Road. The hotel has reopened, so the restaurant is running a full business. What has happened is that when the hotels and restaurants close during circuit breaker, a lot of the chefs take the opportunity to come up with new dishes. So now that the restaurant is reopened, they have launched their new menu. So I went to try the new menu, and some of the dishes were very interesting. Most of them are based on traditional Chinese dishes, but the chef has come up with new ways of presenting it. And you know, presentation is so important these days because everybody wants to put their pictures and their videos on social media. So I think the restaurant has tapped into that. And like every dish comes with a little bit of drama. Like there was this beef short rib that is wrapped in lotus leaf. So what the chef does is that he bakes it in salt, like a salt baked chicken. And then when he serves it, he flambés it with some peppercorn on top. So you get the aroma of the peppercorn before you even eat the dish. And then he unwraps it at the table. So then there's a little bit of drama, which I think diners will enjoy. But most importantly, the dish still tastes really good. It's a very traditional Cantonese dish of braised beef. Yeah, so that's what you get. There are other dishes as well. There's also a sakura chicken soup. And for that, the chef serves it in a little teapot. So it's like the Japanese dobin mushi, you know, the teapot soup. So he does it with a Chinese soup instead. So it looks very pretty in photos, very photogenic. So yeah, so that's what has been new at Man Fu Yuan.
Right. Now, if you had to pick one, Ayo, which would you recommend? Okay,
I really like this dish that the chef does based on a Sichuan dish. It's actually it's a fish poached in peppercorn and salted vegetables. It's actually a very traditional Sichuan dish, but in China, they usually use their freshwater fish from the rivers in China. But in Singapore, we don't get the same kind of fish. So the chef uses a marble gobi instead. And it is poached in this sour, slightly spicy stock. There's some green Sichuan peppercorn in it, which gives it a little tingle on the tongue. The green peppercorn is actually milder than the dried ones that's used for like the mala, hot pot, and things like that. But you still get a little bit of tingling sensation on the tongue, which is very nice. And yeah, the flavors are sour, a little bit spicy, so it's very appetizing. Best eaten with rice.
Right. You got me at fish because fish happens to be my favorite meat.
Okay, good.
Well, thank you, Ayo. That was the Straits Times food critic Wong Ah Yoke. Now, do look out for Ayoke's piece coming out next week.
From food to arts and culture, senior culture correspondent Ong Sor Fern is here to tell us more about Stay Home Quilt Open House. Sor Fern, for a start, what is this initiative all about?
Well, this project is actually an installation started by Singaporean artist Jimmy Ong. It's on at the Zhu Chi Humanistic Youth Centre in Yishun. He started it before the circuit breaker, so it started as a completely different thing. It was a poverty quilt project, and he wanted visitors to the centre to sew buttons on a quilt. But because of circuit breaker, no one can go there, so they mailed out all these packages to different people for them to sew little patches for a quilt at home. So now he's assembled the quilt into a sort of patchwork house, and this weekend, during the open house, people can sign up for a tikka weaving workshop, and you can make a floor mat for the house to complete the installation.
Ah, right. So the workshop is happening this weekend, correct? The Tika
Yes, that's
workshop.
right.
But
Saturday and
the
Sunday.
open house, it's happening, when is it happening till?
The exhibition for the installation for the stay home quilt will be on till the end of November, but the workshops are just on Saturday and Sunday.
Right, okay, so those are two things that you can look out for, the workshop as well as the installation that it's happening all the way till the end of the month.
Yep.
Very exciting stuff indeed. Well, thank you so much, Sor Fern, for coming on to the show to share more on this initiative. We've been speaking to senior culture correspondent Ong Sor Fern. Well, there you go, a couple of places you can check out this weekend, the Stay Home Quilt Open House, as well as the Man Fu Yen.
Well, you can visit straitstimes.com for more news and videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.